Welcome back to Brokers of Secrets. In this episode, we're going to talk about one of the most important emotional states that we all feel from time to time. But it's not necessarily something that you have to stay with. It's the emotion of loneliness. Now, in order to talk about how not to be lonely, we need to talk about how to be lonely. And we need to talk about why people get into that state. And we need to also talk about what it really is. And let's start there. What's loneliness? Loneliness is actually communication from the mind and the body to tell you that your environment is actually not supporting you, or you're not letting your environment support you, or you're not in coherence or in resonance with your environment. You're not aligned. So what do you do about that, right? Because this communication, this signal, is not something that says, oh, you're not worthy of love, or that you're not worthy of being a part of this community, this group, or that you're not good enough, or that you just don't belong. Some people, and we're talking about from both micro to macro, right? Regardless of race, social class, or whatever it is that people perceive as a reason to isolate oneself or others, the primary reason people actually feel lonely has a lot less to do with who they are and how they sit in terms of positioning in society. It has a lot more to do with this communication inside of them. Now, let's break down what this communication is inside of you. If you've ever felt lonely, which I'm sure we all have, if you have ever felt lonely, and I'll share some stories in a bit about loneliness, whether it's from myself or other people anonymously. If you've ever felt lonely, that feeling inside is not just communicating, hey, I feel lonely. It's also communicating that you should do something about it. But most people can't do something about it because they don't have the strategy, nor do they know what the signal means. So the signal keeps repeating itself. The communication keeps repeating itself like it's a loop. And it doesn't tell you exactly what you need to do. It's at least not obviously, nor consciously. So most people, when they feel lonely, they just sit with it. They think time will pass, and therefore they will naturally deal with it. But for a lot of people, for lack of better terms, they're chronically lonely. Even if they're successful, even if they are in a wonderful relationship, even if they are surrounded by family, even if they are in a community that they love, or at least they think they love, even if they're in a work environment that is very supportive, they could still feel lonely because inside their mind, the data that they're wanting to decode is not being decoded. And what they're seeing outside is different than what they're wanting inside. Now, we're going to spend the whole episode breaking down how loneliness happens. But one thing that you need to know is that it is different from person to person. One person may feel lonely because in their mind, they're not with their people. And let's just give you an example. We had a client one time. Growing up, they felt lonely. And as an adult, they still feel lonely. Why? And when we asked them why, of course, they would come up with reasons. And they gave us a lot of reasons, one of which was very interesting. It jumped out at us. He said, when I was a young adult, or frankly, he was in his teenage years, he said, I really liked playing rock music. Wanted to be in a band, wanted to play the guitar, the drums. My parents never let me. They always wanted me to do other things other than playing guitar, hanging out with the people in the rock scene. And he even said my parents looked down on those people. Of course, they would never say it out loud, but I could tell they looked down on those people. And if I wanted to play music, they said the only choice was piano or the cello, which neither were his interests. And he said, I felt lonely because I couldn't hang out with my people. Now, that seems like something that we could all understand, but the real reason they feel lonely is actually a layer below that, or even more. It's a deeper, more subconscious thing. Because this person didn't just feel lonely simply because they weren't with people that enjoy and appreciate the same music, but it's resonance. They were bonding over music and the message and the emotions that were communicated through these music, and those people had similar resonance. Now, let's slow down for a second. What is resonance? Resonance, this is a really important topic, is that you likely have similar values, beliefs, and identity. What does that mean? Beliefs about how reality works, believes about what one thing, when one thing happens, it will lead to another thing. These are things that we call mental programs. You guys can go back to certain episodes before, I think 7 and 8, you can watch what mental programs are. And also, values is part of their mental program. Identity is part of their mental program. Mental program is our accepted rules and laws of reality in our minds, and it governs how you behave, how you believe, how you think, what you value, and your identity, right? And all of these are made up of mental programs. To put it simply, this person was finding friends with others who have similar mental programs, similar identities, values, and beliefs. And that makes it easy for them to communicate. And he views that as my people. And when he was pulled away from that, and look, he grew up in a middle-class household. His parents so desperately wanted to be wealthy. His father started multiple businesses, worked different jobs. His mother was working a lot too. They had this dream of creating something incredible for the children. And as part of that dream, they did not want their children to associate with people that were also in the middle class. They're like, hey, you should learn to play the piano. You should go play cello. You should do certain things that they perceived were hobbies of the wealthier demographics. But that loneliness he felt wasn't because he was in the wrong social class or hanging out with the wrong folks or not with his people, whatever it was. It was that he did not find resonance. Now, what's the solution? What's the solution, right? Could he have both? Could the family have all of it? Have it all, right? See, many of you who are listening or watching, you might be working a job you don't like. Maybe you're in an environment you don't appreciate. Maybe you're in a different city that you're like, man, this is not aligned with how I am or how I have been. I'm going to get out of here as soon as I can. The problem is you are there for a reason, and that your unconscious mind, the reason it's giving you this feeling of loneliness is not that you're isolated in this place or that you don't belong. It's that you, listen carefully, you haven't allowed your mind to be so flexible in learning how to resonate with your environment. Let me put it in a different way. Humans are highly flexible, adaptive social beings. If you are in an environment that's different than where you were before and you refuse to change and upgrade, Not just your environment, but your mind, right? Because you're in this environment that you may or may not be able to change yet. The person that you have the most control over is yourself. So not creating the change. Now, this is not easy to listen to sometimes as feedback. It's like, oh, you're telling me that I feel lonely because I refuse to change? Yes. Now, this is spoken with empathy. I have been there, experienced that for years. And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a kid, I was around 3.5 years old. I had to move from one city to another city because my parents wanted a better life. And perfectly justifiable. Many people do it. Their parents move when they're little kids. Happens all the time. I felt not only the cultural shock, but a completely different society. It was very different. It wasn't even similar. It was actually very, very, very different. At that time, I was living at my first 3-4 years, I was living in China and moving to Hong Kong, completely different environment, cultural shock, everything. I felt lonely because first off, I didn't speak the language. Second, I didn't understand social cues the same way I did that I was trained, right? Unconsciously trained by my parents. Then when I was 7 years old, my parents brought me back into China because my mother got sick. And I didn't go to school for 7-8 months, and I didn't even have my parents around. I just stayed with my grandparents. You guys heard the story if you watched my previous episodes. There's isolation again. I felt lonely again. I was literally alone for a good 7 months most of the time. Then when I was 16 years old, I left and I moved to Massachusetts. Could you imagine how different Hong Kong is from Massachusetts? Do you think that times I felt lonely because, again, I didn't speak the language? Then a year later, I moved to Idaho, of all places on earth. Freezing, by the way, in the wintertime, right? Did I feel lonely? I didn't even have a car to go get around. All my friends that got together, they had cars. Now, that was college. Then a year and a half later, I was in New York City. And every few months, I was moving. Loneliness can happen even if you're surrounded by people and even have people that care about you daily around you, right next to you. Doesn't matter. You could have a wonderful family in a seemingly perfect relationship. You could still feel lonely because, and here's the real truth. My internal rate of change did not match the external demand of change. That's when the loneliness kicks in because I could not adapt. Whenever I felt lonely, I could not adapt to what the external world was giving me signal for. I didn't know how to read the room and the people around me. I mean, think about it. Moving from Idaho to New York City. Imagine that for a moment. Harlem, New York, by the way, right? As drastic of a change as that is, the only choice I had, frankly, I had two choices. One was to feel lonely and not change. Second was, how can I adapt to the social, the human community around me in that new environment? Now, could you feel lonely living in the same place your whole life? Absolutely. Absolutely. But let me break something down for all of us. What is reality, right? If you say, hey, I feel lonely in my reality, you feel lonely. In your reality, you feel lonely. But reality exists. Your reality exists solely in your mind. And therefore, if you feel lonely inside your reality, this is something you have full control over. You don't have to feel lonely. It's a communication, it's a signal from your unconscious telling you, hey, there's something that you may need to change. Now, this may seem unfair of a statement for those of you who are hearing us for the first time. The truth is, however, if you take 100% responsibility for how you think, how you feel, how you behave, you could begin to realize, and you would, that this feeling of loneliness, again, it's a communication from your unconscious to your conscious telling you, guess what, your environment and the people around you may not resonate with you the way you do, or you may not resonate with them the way you want to. And the only way for you to get rid of that loneliness is to adapt and change your model of the world inside. Evolve it. So, in simpler words, if you don't upgrade your mindset whenever you change an environment or change what's going on inside, because those are two factors. You can stay in the same environment, but something will naturally change inside your mind. If you don't adapt, if you're not willing to upgrade your mind, you will find that loneliness could kick in. This is an interesting way of looking at loneliness, isn't it? Because too many people are just like, oh, it's a randomly occurring thing that I just feel, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm not with the right person. Maybe it's because of this or that, all the things we've mentioned so far. Again, the truth is your rate of change and your internal world is not meeting the demand of your external world. And so in your reality, internally, you're feeling this loneliness, like you're not one with others. Now, there's a solution, however. And the solution are 3 parts. Part 1, of course, you need to change what's going on inside, and we'll talk about that in the next few minutes. Part 2 is you actually need to change something in your strategy, in how you curate your environment. Curate and create the environment that will support you. Look, it's not like your hands are tied, that the only way to experience the removal or not to feel lonely is for you to change. The other side of it is, how do you curate your environment? Create an environment that you actually enjoy and feel supported by. And then lastly, you need to understand the actual reason for human communities to exist. Now, this episode may seem random. Why is William talking about loneliness and then creating a supportive environment next? And then the following episode, the third one in this series, will be how to leverage communities for your benefit, right? We'll talk about these. It may seem random, it's not. Because your success, your longevity, your happiness can be exponentially increased if you understand that your loneliness that you feel, and trust me, too many people have it, but are not willing to talk about how lonely they feel. In fact, majority of the population, if not more, feel lonely, whether they tell you or not, right? It's easy. You just look inside. How often do you or have you felt lonely over even just the last year or your whole life, right? This feeling is not uncommon because it's communication. But you cannot just sit with it. You need to do something about it. It's a communication telling you, guess what? You're not aligned. They're not aligned with you. You're not leveraging your environment. You're not creating an environment that supports your greatest potential. And that adds to the feeling of loneliness. Because imagine alone in this world, not achieving what you are meant to achieve. That only adds to it. Your mind is giving you warning. There's something to be done here. And then how do you leverage community? To understand how to leverage communities, you need to understand what community is really for. And I'm going to give you a hint. Communities are here to not just support you, but to regulate you, to help you further your goals, to create, again, that exponent. See, this episode and the following two, so all 3 episodes, are the last 5 to 10% of what we were talking about. Last 5 to 10% meaning most people who knows how to work hard and or are relatively intelligent can get themselves to 90% of what they want or what they need. They can get to 90% of potentially their best life. But that last 10% is not 10%. It's 100, it's 1,000, it's 1,000,000x. So 90% of their best life could just seem mediocre. And they will feel it. In fact, a lot of successful founders, successful entrepreneurs, successful executives, leaders, or frankly, people who are really good at what they do, a lot of them, by working hard and being intelligent, they can get themselves to 90%. But that last 5 to 10% is not easy to access because it's purely unconscious until you learn to make it conscious, which is what we're doing here. And one of the things that is often unconscious is the feeling of loneliness and what it communicates. That feeling of loneliness is so important to decipher and decode. If you don't, you will find major issues when it comes to how much you can achieve. It will come, and the quality of life. You may not feel that you can achieve your full potential when you're feeling lonely. You may not feel, of course, you're not going to feel supported if you're feeling lonely. You're not going to actually have all of the support you want. Now, let's give you some quick strategies how to actually not feel lonely. First, you need to understand where that loneliness, which area of your life it's coming from. So here are some ways to break that down. One, is it work related? Do you feel the most lonely when you're at work? Some people are like, no, I feel the most lonely when I'm not at work. Well, then you know that may not be it. But some people feel incredibly lonely in their workplace. Maybe it's in a large corporation or or it could be a small team. They feel unacknowledged. They feel lonely. They don't feel supported. They feel like they are not resonating with what they do. That can happen. But guess what? It has a lot more to do with them than their environment. Second, at home. Do you feel lonely at home? Some people live with their family. They have wife and kids, or husband and kids, or parents, or whatever, siblings. They're living with their family, and yet they feel lonely. They're just roommates, technically. They feel lonely. They could be sleeping in the same bed. They feel lonely. You need to identify if that's where you feel the most loneliness. Yeah. Then maybe it's your social setting, or maybe you don't have one. Maybe it's a hobby of yours. Maybe it's something else when you travel. It could be a very short period of time, which is perfectly normal. If you're traveling to a foreign country, you don't speak the language, even though you might be having fun, you could feel lonely. But if you are feeling lonely all the time, or very often, in work, at home, in your personal life, it needs to be addressed. Now that you know where it may be coming from, the second thing you need to ask is, when did this begin? Just like a computer program, there's a first installation date. If you know when this program began, this feeling of loneliness likely began right after the program, this unknown program, was installed. Now, what is a program in this scenario, right? For example, we have this client. When they were asked when this emotion first started for them, it was when they were 3 years old. Now, you may say, hey, how could they remember? The unconscious mind records everything. When they were 3 years old, and this may sound silly to you, but for a 3-year-old, it's not. Their parents went on a vacation and left her with her grandparents for 2 weeks. It's not that long of a vacation, but it is a long time for a 3-year-old. And when she was left alone with her grandparents, which obviously not her parents, she felt lonely. She felt abandoned. She felt like her parents weren't there for her. Now, you may say, again, this is too dramatic. It's a 3-year-old. Of course, they're going to feel that way. But that was her whole world. So during that time, when she started to feel lonely, the message was, my world does not care about me. My parents don't care about me. Therefore, I should not care about them. And so growing up, as she got older and older, she found her relationships worsen with her parents. It's crazy how one small thing, 2-week vacation, and of course not every kid's parents who took a 2-week vacation ruined their whole life's relationship. It doesn't work like that because we're so organic as human beings. In this very scenario, all of the setup and her internal mental programs led her to feel that way. And so she continued to self-fulfill that prophecy of she is lonely and people don't care about her, and she would act very cold. She was very cold. And she also unconsciously removed a lot of her ability to read social cues, to then subconsciously validate, justify, and recreate that world where she feels lonely in. Because that's her model of the world. That's her reality. Unbeknownst to her, this is something she could change. She could actually unblock, remove that loneliness, and actually change her reticular activation system and what it's picking up, what it's filtering and not filtering, and notice social cues that she didn't think existed. And this would be a relatively fast process. But you have to find the root cause, the program that led to her feeling lonely. That program that was associated with her feeling lonely. And that it was when she was 3 years old. Now, so you need to find when, because when you find the root cause the very first time, you can then ask yourself, what can you learn from it? And learning is a way for you to decipher, decode emotions. Anytime you feel an emotion stuck inside of you and you can't get rid of it and you've been feeling it for a long time and it's unpleasant, you need to ask, what can I learn from it so I can let it go? It's because it's communicating something to you. If you ignore it, suppress it, try to forget it, it doesn't work. It comes back because it's a message from yourself. And you're not getting away from yourself, no matter what. So, step one, what was step one? Step one was identifying which area of your life do you feel it, which will help you answer step two. When did I first feel this, right? Then step three, what can I learn from this? Because this feeling is associated with the program. You can learn something from it. The program will detach from the feeling and reveal itself. The feeling is there literally to help you see which program it's attached to. But you have to let yourself relax and ask these questions. Once you have done all the steps, you may notice that your loneliness either decreases dramatically or completely disappear. And the moment it completely disappears, it's when you know you've actually decoded every single one of the learnings, the messages from these programs. And most of these programs, in summary, came from a time when it served you back then to protect you, to do whatever. But now, as an adult or as you have gotten older, it no longer serves you, so there's no reason to hold on to them anymore. So loneliness, again, is a message coming from your subconscious, coming from your body, coming from you, and you need to decode it. And by decoding it, you will know exactly what to change, how to resonate with your environment. And that's important because not only your survival, but also your success, your prosperity, your ability to actually live up to your true potential are critically impacted by how and or when you decode the messages behind loneliness. And I choose loneliness because I'm going to give you a hint, because we're going to talk about it in the next episode, the next 2 episodes, is that your community and your environment are your exponents. If you pick the wrong one, or even if you're in the right one, but you're feeling lonely, it's because you're not resonating. So if you're not resonating with your community or your environment, you are missing out on one of the greatest exponents for your success, happiness, and more. So stay tuned. We'll see you in the next episode.